Namaste, my name is Amish Tripathi and I'm the director of the Nehru Centre, London. Now, some may think of Nehru Centre as just this beautiful fine building, and it is a fine building, no doubt. We have a wonderful art gallery out here. We have an awesome auditorium on the first floor with a capacity of 100 to 120 people right here in the heart of central London in Mayfair. But the Nehru Centre is a lot more than this fine building. The Nehru Centre is also an online platform. We are available on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram and on YouTube. And so the Nehru Centre is actually wherever you want it to be. Of course, we'd love for you to come to the physical events that we organize out here when we do organize them. But do join all our online platforms as well. This is a hybrid world. We are going to have offline physical events and online events as well. So do join our online platforms and do keep giving us feedback of what you think of it. We'd love to host you out there. We'd love to hear what you think of our events, and do keep sending in your suggestions as well. We do keep imbibing and learning from the feedback that you give to us to give you programs that you guys might enjoy. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Namaste. Jai Hind. Namaste, my name is Amish Tripathi and I'm the director of the Nehru Centre. This is the first event we are having after a very sad event for the Nehru Centre family. A former employee of ours who had retired early last year, Mr. Narayan, passed away due to a massive heart attack. The entire team, all of us, were shocked and heartbroken. And I would request if all of you could join us in wishing strength and courage and hope to Narayan's family who remain behind in India. And thank you so much for listening to this personal message from all of us at the Nehru Centre. This event that is being put up today is on a fiction book called Mission Shengzhan. I think perhaps the best way to speak of it is a term that the authors themselves used, quoting Stephen King, that fiction is the truth inside the lie. Mission Shengzhan by Tuhin Sinha and Suraj Prasad is India's quest for truth in the post-COVID world, led by her dynamic and visionary PM, Shiv Patel. And to have this conversation, this event, we have both the authors of the book here. Tuhin Sinha is a best-selling author, screenwriter, and politician. He's here along with his co-author Clark Prasad, which is the alter ego of Suraj Prasad, and who could be called a citizen of planet Earth, a graduate of IIM Kozhikode, and now an author as well. And to be in conversation with Tuhin and Clark, our Lieutenant General retired Syed Atta Hasnain, we are deeply honored that General Saab has come to the Nehru Centre platform for this book, and we hope that he will come much more often. Lieutenant General retired Syed Atta Hasnain is the former GOC 15 Corps, Chancellor, Central University of Kashmir, and member, National Disaster Management Authority. And to host this entire conversation is Anand Narasimhan, one that I'm sure all of you know, the very popular and famous CNN IBN anchor. He's a managing editor, special projects, and senior anchor at Network 18 of the program The Right Stand. Anand, over to you.
Namaste, and thank you very, very much, Amishji. Always a pleasure to speak with you also. We are at the cusp of, let's say, a cultural and civilizational awakening of Bharat, and we are also on the cusp of shifting geopolitics, ladies and gentlemen. We are on the cusp when we will see the world differently in the decade from now. There are many who are going to grow up to a very, very new world at various levels, and of course, many of you are aware of the current crisis in Ukraine and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. A lot of us are also aware of how we stood up to a bully very right next to our doors when they tried to get into Galwan, and we gave them a punch in the nose and a bloody nose at that. And there are reasons for what happened. Plus, we are all emerging out of the pandemic. Three waves of the pandemic in India, three large waves, and of course, there are many other nations that are still reeling from it. We as a nation have been able to vaccinate more than 80% of the eligible population at least twice, completely vaccinated, and 97% of the eligible population till now has been vaccinated at least once. More than 175 crores and still counting. And now 12 to 14-year-olds are also now going to be vaccinated. So a very, very proud moment for India. But here again, there is a dynamic shift. So talk about all of that and what made it into the book Mission Shengzhan. Fiction, fact, a little bit in between. We'll ask Tuhin Sinha and also Suraj Prasad, like to call it that and not his alter ego name, that is Clark Prasad. But first, I'm going to say Namaste and Jai Hind to General Ata Hasnain. General Saab, such a pleasure to be able to speak with you. These are
Absolutely.
interesting. These are interesting times, and for the analytical, expert mind of yours, you've already drawn a few conclusions and a few learnings. I read your article recently, but let me ask you this: is the deep state involved? I'm going to start with the role of this deep state or those silent powers in the shadows. Are they engineering all that we are seeing over the last 2.5 years across the world?
See, Anand, first of all, thank you for having me in this show. The term deep state, the moment you mention that, for every Indian who knows something about strategic issues, it's a reminder of Pakistan, because that's where we always talk about the deep state. The deep state is not necessarily only in Pakistan. The deep state can be in various countries around the world. The smallest of countries, the largest and most powerful of countries. It is essentially a state within a state. It is a power within a power. That is a hardcore element. For example, in the case of Pakistan, it is considered to be the army chiefs, some senior veterans, the DG of the ISI, members of the judiciary, some retired veteran members of the judiciary, all of them who've got certain stakes, personal stakes in the activities and actions which the deep states do. It's not
Hmm.
necessarily always in national interest. It is
Hmm.
in the interest of the deep state itself. To come back to your specific question, yes, much of what is happening. For
Hmm.
example, you see in Russia itself, in the Russian public is not even aware, perhaps, completely of what is happening in Ukraine. Russia's information war is attempting to keep it all under wraps. The decision making is essentially a coterie of a few people, Putin and few people around him. That
Yeah.
is essentially the deep state. Now, similar thing in China. It's not as if it's the entire Chinese Communist Party which is involved in decision making. To an extent, yes, in guidance, etc. It is a coterie of a few people, and they are the powerful people. They are the people for whom there are personal stakes and power involved in this. Obviously, their decisions are not necessarily always friendly decisions, and these are not always in the interest of their home state either.
True. General Saab, you talked about the Pak Deep State, and I was speaking to a very, very senior person the other day, and they said that this Pak Deep State seems to be fueled only by the humiliation of 1971. A lot of them are still have not been able to get over the humiliation of 1971, and that's what continues to goad them into certain directions, which is perhaps, like you said, not in the best interest of the people of Pakistan, but somewhere they have an obsession that is the downfall of India. We'll come to that in just a bit. Let me also bring in the authors whose book I love to read. It was a riveting read, and I must congratulate you, Tuhin Sinha and Suraj Prasad. My namaste to the two of you. Brilliantly written book. What a story that you've conceived, and it was very aptly timed. And I was looking at kahan pe twist hai. Where is it that you're going to say something which is different? You said a lot of things, but then you also let it remain in the dimension of fiction. So let me ask you, Suraj, do you know Tuhin from before the book, or did you stumble upon each other at a coffee shop and said, okay, I'm thinking of writing a book, I'm thinking of writing a book, okay, let's write it together?
So, 14 अंडाज अपना अपना mark इधर है. I would like to thank Mark Zuckerberg for knowing to him because I knew him only through Facebook. I reached out to him. I come from the state from Bihar. My father is from Bihar, Motihari. So, and Shivastav, but I don't put it as Shivastav. And his Sinha, we just interacted, talked as when I
अच्छा,
was
तो ये
not.
बिहारी कनेक्शन है. अच्छा,
Uh,
समझ में आया.
very connected,
हाँ,
yeah. But my mother is from Mangalore, so I'm north and south. So,
right.
so
Okay. Hmm.
and so in that direction only we started talking and over years, and we found a common ground in our thinking, in our way of approach. And I really respect Tuhin for his balanced view and perspectives. And one day he reached out to me that he had this idea in his head in 2019, and I said, "Fine, I wrote my book in 2010, Baramulla Bomber. I'm ready to start again." So we started talking and framed the story, and we never knew things would just turn so much
So,
towards this.
so,
So
so you wrote about Kashmir, and it's quite proverbial or prophetical, if I may say, not proverbial, prophetical to Hinsina, that your previous book, which is about a love story in Kashmir, talked about an ending which is actually manifest today. Albeit in
Yes,
a different dynamic, but it is manifest today.
that's. I think we all, the nationalists saw that coming. But let me begin first by just, I think it's a very special occasion where the first, the two people gracing this occasion are among the first few readers of the book, and very diligent readers. So General Saab read it before the book went into print and was very kind to provide a blurb to it. And Anand was among the first readers, and I was surprised at his pace of reading, because with all his hectic shows and travel, I think he managed to complete the book in 3 or 4 days, which was and somebody like me is a very erratic reader, so I was very surprised by that. So yes, I mean, throughout my writing career, it has been a challenge for me to weave fiction with reality. So in fact, most of my books, whether even if it is the earlier books, relationship stories, the challenge was, or the kick would come from giving the readers situations where they would keep guessing where is it that fiction ends and reality begins, and vice versa, which of the characters are real. So I think the problem was that between 2015 and 2018, I think I was overtly busy chasing certain pursuits which were not happening for reasons best known to the powers that be.
Mm.
But anyway,
We
I
park that
was
on the
going
side.
through.
We'll
Sorry.
park that aside. I said we'll park that aside for the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I had certain stories to convey, to write, but unfortunately, because of a attention span issue, whatever, I genuinely felt I needed a co-author, with whom I could share the sensibilities. And it's very surprising. I tend to be very impulsive, or I just approached Suraj out of the blue when there are nearly 5,000 friends on the Facebook list, because there was this feeling that I think he's written an international thriller. He talks about
Mm.
geopolitics. He subscribes to similar ideological views. But the best part was that I think apart from all of that is the sincerity which he brings to the table, the research which he brings to the table. So I think it has been a wonderful experience. And
Mm.
largely, I would say, when we started writing the book, the core idea was that India is under siege from visible and invisible powers.
Mm.
Now, we had assumed that conventional war would never happen again. So, we were imagining all sorts of invisible war formats and unconventional war formats. But of course, the Russia-Ukraine war has put that theory behind. So now we need to coexist with conventional and maybe hybrid war, as General Saab would be in a better position to explain that.
Yes, we'll
Yes, I
get
mean,
to that.
that's how the book happened. And I'm so glad that we also have in the book a very realistic Indian prime minister who's
Yes.
negotiating all the evil
Yeah, he
situations.
is. No, and see, there are a lot of things, a lot of lessons to learn. One is this India under siege. General Saab, we know that this is a civilization or this is a land, this is an which forces want to occupy, and they've been trying to do so for at least 1200 years. There is a struggle which is there, which is a larger struggle. But the turn of say 2015, 2016 onwards, or let's say from 2010 onwards, there has been a build up, there's been a quiet build up which said that the axis of powers are going to change. Now, there are multiple people who have different thoughts as far as what will be the drivers. Many believe that data is the new oil, so data is one aspect. Many believe water is going to fuel the future wars, and the entire occupation of Tibet by the Chinese by the PLA in 1949 also shows that they realize that future is going to be water. And then, of course, the future minerals, those that will power energy of the future. Now, do all of these have a role to play in what we are seeing? And another part which I want to ask you, General Saab, somebody told me that the COVID-19 virus or the China virus is a virus that leaked before time. Otherwise, it would have been unleashed at the right time.
Sir, you're on mute.
General Saab, you're on mute. Go ahead.
So sorry. A very,
Ah.
very interesting question, and loaded to some extent, but something very interesting to comment upon. Let's start by saying that in the case of India, I think 1977 was a very defining year when Ziaul Haq came to power in Pakistan and decided that Pakistan could not take on India on the conventional battlefield. Pakistan needed to go nuclear at that time to set aside the asymmetry, and that Pakistan would battle India in different domains other than the physical kinetic domain. It starts from there. And progressively it has built up. The year 2014, 15, 16, very correctly identified by you. In fact, I would take it a little beyond 2017, 18, when the strategic confidence of India started building up. I would say perhaps if you look at the surgical strikes, you look at what happened in Doklam, you have a look at what happened with the Pulwama and the response to Pulwama at Balakot, subsequently in 2019, what happened on the 5th of August with the abrogation of Article 370. All this led to an idea that India was now coming into its own strategically and confidence was building. India could not be allowed to do this because it's too powerful a nation. In the sense, the potential is far too high. $3 trillion looking at $5 trillion, looking at $10 trillion. Where would it be? Among the competition of powers, it would occupy a very large space. Something had to be done. Physically, to capture India, defeat India, occupy India is no longer possible. Therefore, hybridity. This started in the 80s, actually, with the experiment in Punjab, the attempts to trigger off turbulence within Punjab. That was an experiment by itself. And then after 1989, 1990, what's being described in the K files at the moment, the Holocaust against the Kashmiri Pandits, and from then on, this experimentation has been going on. By the time we have come to 2012, 13, 14, 15, a new dimension of warfare has suddenly emerged. And this is the fillip which has been given to information war to become a domain of its own. Information war, psychological war, put together with cyber, everything combined into it, forming what is called today gray zone war, which is essentially attempting to impinge on the ideology of the nation, impinge on the political thinking of the nation, the ability to take decisions by the nation, the overall economic environment of the nation, and the relationships that the nation itself enjoys with other different nations of the world. It's all mostly in the non-military field, in the non-kinetic field, that you find this progressing hugely. And no one has an answer as to how to really counter this. It's very difficult. We haven't found answers to it yet.
Yeah.
You see, it's very simple to say have an all-of-government approach against hybrid war and all. It's gone beyond hybrid. It's gone far beyond hybrid. And this book by our two authors actually somehow, I'm surprised as to how they got into the depth of it. It actually exemplifies gray zone warfare in a big way. Not many books so far have emerged on the international scene anywhere which have covered these aspects, the aspects of you know economics, the aspects of subterfuge, social media, cyber warfare, all these kind of things mixed together to try and dilute the importance of a nation.
True, and you can colonize a nation, you can change a nation without even waging a
Yeah.
conventional war with it. Now, what Putin is trying to do is perhaps the least damaging of all forms. Yes, Ukraine is suffering. Yes, Ukraine is hurting. Yes, people have been displaced. But imagine the alternative. Alternative would have been a chemical war or a bio war, to try and ravage and send a pandemic out there and destroy a nation. His objective, right, doesn't seem to be to destroying a nation in terms of its people. He seems to be acquiring a certain territory because it has got a certain strategic depth and importance to him. And if people have understood and researched it, you would see that the entire plains, the European plains, Eastern European plains, are an open area for NATO to advance right up to the Ural Mountains. And strategically for him, that means that NATO and America will park its guns, its nuclear missiles, and its guns right at Russia's doorstep. So that's where the strategic depth General Hasnain comes for, and where he says that, yeah, I may be displacing 30 lakh Ukrainians today, but they can always come back and live because I'm not going to, but I'm going to secure Russia. For me to secure Russia is of larger strategic importance from Putin's point of view. But General Saab, what I want to understand is, be it China, that is the Wuhan lab, which Tuhin and Suraj talk about, or in Ukraine, there are bio labs that are funded by the Americans. Then the Americans have accepted that these biolabs are funded by us and we are backing it. So, what is this game that the Americans are playing? And since they control the narrative, everything they do seems to be justified or seems to be brushed under the carpet. They justified Iraq, they justified Afghanistan, destruction of Afghanistan, and this rapid pull out of it, where they have given it back to and pushed it again into the medieval ages and to the depths of darkness. And now they're trying to justify Ukraine. They've hung Ukraine out to dry. That's stark reality. And it's their biolabs. So, what is happening in terms of this kind of warfare? This is dangerous. These are nations who seem to be champions of democracy and peace and progress, etc., on the face of it, but they are the ones who are orchestrating the future wars and creating the weapons that threaten to wipe out entire races and ethnically cleanse planet Earth.
There is no doubt about it that when it comes to playing the narratives around the world, the Western world, led by the United States, NATO, represented by NATO, are past masters. They have been using information as a warfare system for ages, and today, with all the implements and tools which are available through the internet, through the information technology methodologies, they are all available to them to exploit. But coming back to the specific issue of biological warfare, uh, the kind of research which has been going on, it's now becoming very, very obvious that huge amounts of research on these issues is going around in different parts of the world, not necessarily on own territories, but actually outsourced to different territories, probably paid for in a couple of millions and billions of dollars. Uh, this is an alternative form of warfare. You see, what is becoming more and more interesting now is the development of alternate forms of warfare. Earlier, you only depended on kinetics. You were depending on front lines and rear lines and flanks. Slowly, you found that as irregular warfare came in, all this disappeared. Kinetic warfare continued to remain there very much, but was subsequently substantiated by many more other forms of warfare, hybrid being one of them, irregular being one of them, fourth generation, fifth generation. Now it seems that one of the most inexpensive forms of warfare, when you hardly suffer anything and you are in a high state of deniability, you can actually employ biological warfare. And this perhaps is essentially being looked at, being employed against nations which are rising, potential nations which are becoming stronger. For example, the Chinese themselves, it's the Americans using it against them, the Chinese using it against us. Nations which have the potential to rise, how to ensure that mass effects on that population, We've seen what happened with the pandemic in India for the last 2 years, the kind of lockdowns we've had, the effects on our economy. Forget the economy, look at the effect on the psyche of the nation. It will take some time for us to be able to recover from it. A whole generation of people, a generation of young people, which has been affected so adversely. So there is no doubt that this is a weapon which has not been utilized, exploited in the past. When it came to the Spanish pandemic in 1918, it just happened naturally and was not really a weapon at that time. It was not even researched subsequently till the late 60s and the 70s. But today, this weapon is being seen to be a very, very effective weapon as a part of this overall hybrid gray zone game. And
Comprehensive.
that is where the danger of it lies.
Yes, and we would have succumbed to it, to him. We would have succumbed to it had it not been for the kind of leadership and the kind of effort that was put in by the government of the day under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. You got to credit him there. Whether you agree with him, disagree with him, you have to credit him there. Why? Because imagine the situation, to in what we are looking at. We're looking at a pandemic we had no clue about. He set the process of the vaccine on even at February 2020, when he told the scientists of our country to look at our own vaccine, because he knew we can't afford vaccines made by the West because they will extract their pound of flesh, and we are a population of 1 billion people. We had to mobilize our armed forces at that time because China moved in on Galwan thinking that India is going to be vulnerable and they're going to be so busy handling the pandemic. Look at what we had, a crumbling medical infrastructure. We had a crumbling medical infrastructure, and this is what happened. Had the prime minister not studied the Spanish flu and realized that nations that chose life over economy actually had their economy booming later on, and nations that chose economy over life always struggled even 2 3 years, 4 years, 5 years after the pandemic was over. This was a learning from Spanish flu, and look how fast he called for the lockdown. Go ahead.
Well, absolutely. The best part about Prime Minister Modi is his ability to turn every crisis into an opportunity. So while, yes, India was the first country to announce a lockdown on this massive scale, we were also the first to unleash a series of PLA schemes and reforms immediately within 2 months, which was around the mid of May, because he realized that this is the India's opportunity to overtake China. This is India's opportunity to truly become self-sufficient. And yes, what followed after that was perhaps the best executed vaccination program in the world. Around the same time, we negotiated China's incursions on the border. So, the all-round leadership, all-round consolidated leadership of Prime Minister Modi in the last 2 years will be referred to.
No, and you would have also noticed a shifting posture in our foreign policy, in how we spoke to the world, and how we wanted the world to speak to us, and how we want the world to perceive us. I'm
And
sure
that's even
when
And
yeah,
that's
go
even
ahead.
evident, in the last 1 month throughout the Russia-Ukraine crisis, where we have not succumbed to the pressure of the West. See, coming back to the book, because I'll just relate
Hmm.
to India's foreign policy
Yeah.
here, or what was happening around in the preceding months in the preceding months before the pandemic struck. At least in my head, because I believe structuring is my forte, I could very clearly see two clear fault lines in world politics. One was a growing communist Islamist nexus, and on the other hand was the larger League of Democracies. The first chunk, which is the communist Islamist nexus, if I may call them, was aiding a certain deep state which was being encouraged to overthrow popular democracies. Now, I may be, sounding a little ambitious with this plan, but I could see, or I could sense something of this nature happening. So, one studies the U.S. election which followed immediately, and Suraj has, done extensive research in U.S. politics also, and equally a series of local anarchist activities which started in India around the same time. All of that, I think it may sound a little presumptuous, but I can say it with some amount of responsibility. There was a link. They were all interlinked. So, yes, I mean, to deal with all of these challenges simultaneously for a leader, apart from the ones which were clearly and overtly visible, required, required metal of another nature, required, a rare ability, which thankfully the prime minister has.
No, and not just that. So Clark, talk about it. There's no such thing as a coincidence. There is always a pattern. There is always a reason why things happen. And the situation from the time when you wrote Baramulla Bamba to when you wrote and when you contributed or co-authored Mission Shengzhan, India itself changed.
Changed.
In less than a decade, India changed, and and as India changed its posture, it somewhere, for the first time in a long time, preempted a shifting global axis and a shifting posture across the world.
That's true. That's true. And uh, the whole philosophy of Atmanirbhar, because now we see how global supply chain was hit in the pandemic, and we are lucky that we have a strong agri economy, but also now with a lot of leadership and a lot of areas like investment in semiconductor space, industry investment in make in India. So the production is so we can have the food, we have the medicine, we have in terms of infrastructure to create manufacture things, we have the software power also, the hardware, software, the people power. So and channelizing energy. I remember 2014 when Prime Minister Modi spoke this statement. If we take one step ahead, each one of us, we actually
Hmm.
move 1 crore, 100 crore steps ahead, the
Ahead.
population. So that really resonated with me, and it's the change which is there to make believe, because we talk about India under siege. I was talking to once to my father. I
Yeah.
really wonder what goes in his mind. He has been under constant attack from everywhere, constantly, every time. How does he keep his cool? And
Hmm.
it is it's the mind of a different nature, and connected with the book in terms of it, as General Sir has said about the change of warfare. Before it was just physical occupation, take the resources and all. Now we need to take the mind space. We need to take the soul space. Destroy the soul, destroy family, destroy the mind, destroy confidence. A demotivated population can be won very easily. It doesn't matter. So I believe right now with the Prime Minister leadership, it's about channelizing energy together towards creating new vision. India has found its voice, independent voice. It's not a non-aligned movement. It is not in terms of the Warsaw Pact or NATO Pact, anything. It's the Indian Bharat movement, and that is something I think each one of us should feel proud and think how each one of us can contribute to building upon it and tell a story.
True, and no,
And
four
Anand,
percent of
may I come
yes,
in, Anand,
yes,
here?
yes, General Sir,
I've
yes,
got
General Sir.
something to say on these two very, very interesting issues. Number one, on the aspect of India's foreign policy, current foreign policy, I term it, with the non-aligned movement, we used to be neutral,
Yeah.
and no one paid attention to us. Whether we were neutral or not, no one paid attention to us. Today, we are not neutral. We are informed neutral.
Correct.
We are neutrality is an informed neutrality. You see, when we express our neutrality, we give rationale and reasoning for it. At the same time, we appeal to the parties to stop the violence, prevent the violence from spreading at this time. That is the difference which is being made in today's environment. The second issue, perhaps I am a little better empowered to speak on the response to the pandemic, because
Yes,
I was a part of the one of the empowered groups,
yes, I
and I
know, and
want
I
to
was
tell
about to
you
come to you with
this.
that. Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I want to tell you this. This everyone talks of all of government approach. You see, everyone says that in today's world, every problem is to be looked at from an all of government approach. Here, it was demonstrated. 11 empowered groups. I was part of one of them, which was looking after communication, which means essentially sending the word down to the people. What is COVID? How do you fight COVID? Right? What is inoculation, vaccination? Why must you take vaccination? Why must 100% of India take vaccination? This was done on a mass scale all over the country. We had people from the medical side, we had people from information and broadcasting, NGOs, academics, all kinds of people with us.
Hmm.
This model of governance is
Hmm.
something which has not been written sufficiently about yet. But I'm sure it will find its place in the years to come when people start analyzing how did India actually tackle the COVID
Hmm.
virus.
No, I agree. But when one of the important aspects for us as a country is that we've realized that you look at Ukraine, you look at Hong Kong, you look at Afghanistan. Nobody's going to come and fight for you 40 hours, Janazab. Nobody, everybody will say, I support you, I'll back you, I'll give you this, I'll give you that. But you have to stand up for yourself. And frankly, had we not stood up and had we not mobilized like we did against the PLA as far as Galwan is concerned, nobody would have come to help us. They
Absolutely.
would have just said, just resign to the fate. They would have said, oh, very wrong of China. Oh, very wrong. See, because the Prime Minister is very right. Only the strong will be spoken to. Only the strong will be negotiated with. And only the strong will be respected. And you would agree, do you agree, Janasab, that today India has turned around and said, I have 25% of the world's population. I will be strong, I will be resilient, I will be self reliant, not because I want to come and bully you, but because I make sure you don't bully me.
Correct.
Absolutely. That is the message which is going on. There's no doubt.
So in fact,
A- and in this case, what also allows us to do, see, this is has to be a conscience of a nation has to be awakened, Jansab, and Tuhin in this, Suraj, because
Yeah.
we've been brainwashed to think that we are inferior. This is 400 years of 4 to 600 years of brainwashing. We've been brainwashed to think we can't do things on our own. We have to be dependent. We've been brainwashed to think that we have to lean on a culture or civilization or a way of life outside of our existing culture and way of life, because our culture and our way of life is inferior.
Yeah.
We have been brainwashed to think that we should not speak in our languages, we should detest our languages, we should detest our literature, we should detest our traditions because they are inferior. See, this is the brainwashing, and this is what we have to emerge out of. And that comes only when there is a singularity of cause, and that causes the country. See, look at, I think, aren't there lessons when you write your book?
Yeah.
You also have to admire the enemy, Surya. You have to admire the adversary for their single-minded focus.
you know, unfortunately,
1949, Mao writes in a doctrine, and subsequent leaders are following that doctrine.
100 years, 100 years doctrine.
Yeah, it's a
It's
100-year doctrine. They're not deviating from that. America has decided that its doctrine is that it will continue to remain the most powerful nation in the world. It will do whatever it takes to keep America secure. So if I have to go ahead and destroy another nation, I will not think twice about it. I will do it smartly, but I'll make sure so that America remains powerful. So why shouldn't I think about myself as a country, as an
It-
entity? Do
And
you
the
think
more
America should do that?
and the more self-confidence we continue to progressively gain, you will find the situation exactly as brought out in this book, General Jin Tao, the
yeah,
Yeah.
famous,
Gentile,
the man
Gentile.
thank
who
you,
is
sir.
evolving, the deep state man who's evolving this entire plan against India, the United States, the world economy, and things like that, is essentially, you can make out that is the confidence of India which is hurting them. You see,
Yeah.
when they realize that the United States has had a history behind it, Europe has had a history behind it, India has had a history but has not risen to its natural position to which it should rise. And it will rise and therefore give competition to China in the future. That strategic confidence which India is gaining today is not acceptable to China or not acceptable to many other people,
Not to
right?
anybody. Yeah.
Not to anybody at the moment. The fact that we announced, our prime minister announced after the last elections, okay, we are a $2 trillion economy and we're heading to be a $5 trillion economy by 2025. That was a statement by itself, which must have shaken many people in the world at that particular time. So I still profess that what happened in Galwan and what happened all along the line of actual control in eastern Ladakh was nothing but a step taken rising strategic confidence. Otherwise,
Hmm.
with 50,000 troops, you don't come to do a campaign style battle. You came
Correct.
there basically to hit our ego, to hit our minds, and tell us we are an inferior state.
Hmm. True, and we hit them back and
look,
told them that
Absolutely.
you are an
Anand,
inferior army, and your one child policy has come back to hurt you so much that these children cannot survive the harsh climate that we have grown up to endure, and we mountain battles you don't fight with us. So we've given them a bloody nose, but they will come back
They will come
because
back.
they have to follow that doctrine.
yeah.
So they have to go ahead and adhere to that doctrine because they have invested more than $200 billion. They'll sink as a nation if this whole thing sinks. And anyways, there are so many provinces in China which are suffering today. So, there are many who have predicted that by 2030, even though they want to realize something in 2035, China will not remain the nation that it is today by 2030, because there will be a huge movement internally, which will again do a perestroika slash glasnost, which it did with erstwhile Soviet Russia, and it will happen with China. That's what people say. So we have an opportunity. But in your book, you also talk about that India, despite its fallacies, despite its issues as a is aware of this threat, and somewhere there are people who are still what it takes to protect the country. So you identified certain characters there who also do this. They sacrifice themselves for the nation.
Yeah, so I can't mention the sacrificial because that's the twist of the book. But in a way, you said right, because uh, the challenge is not only physical warfare; it's economic, it's agriculture, it's minerals and metals, as you said. And only yesterday or today it came in the paper that the Saudi government is thinking of accepting yuan instead of dollar,
Yeah,
and
for the oil trade,
yeah, and in our book we actually wrote about the petrodollar system and all.
petrodollar system. No,
Chinese
yeah,
down.
you talked about a new geo-economic system, because
Yeah,
currencies and the way we
currencies and
know
how
and
they
the
want to take over the US dollar. Yeah.
yeah,
So that is the battle coming in, and imagine, just look at the steps. The dollar sign is there, the pound sign is there. When did the rupee sign came in actual, instead of
yeah,
INR, the real rupee sign? So these are
correct.
the identities. These are small things, which is a long term plan, and the challenge is that if we these things has to be done slowly, and people have to sort of look at it, and we have to find a way to find solutions, because China is on the door. They're
Hmm.
not going back.
Yeah,
And a bully is only afraid of a bigger bully. We can go back
correct.
to school times and look at it. A bully after
Hmm.
a bigger bully. We don't have to be a bully, but we just have to have our own strength to withstand. So
True, and
that
the bully needs to know, not even a bigger bully. If the bully knows that hurting you is going to hurt the bully,
yes.
they'll not hurt you. So because bullies are
You
also
know,
big cowards,
Anand, if
large.
in
But
the
one thing that stands out, and yeah, make your point and also talk about this to him, that we as a nation now have to realize that we need to have foresight and vision. It's the first time in a long time that we are talking about an Amrit Kal, a 25-year period from 75 to 100. It's a 25-year roadmap. The first time I heard a prime minister in nearly 4.5 decades of my life who talked about not the next 5 years. Yeah, they talked about 2030, 2035, 2047, and 2070.
Mhm.
You know, that's the roadmap
You
that's
know,
being spoken about.
the biggest
It's not about
difference
5-year elections. Yes, Tuin.
the biggest difference that I can, I'm sure all of us can see in the last 8 years was 8 years ago, democracy used to be a much abused term. It used to be it used to be a very convenient alibi for all our failings as a nation. But
Hmm.
I think the Prime Minister has leveraged the power of democracy and shown its strength. If today, you see, if progressively you see the credibility of US going down in the world, it also has to do with the quality of leadership that India is presenting to the world. I mean, India and US are the two biggest democracies. So if one democracy has a completely different level of leadership and the other is floundering at that level, that makes the difference all the more visible. So I
Yes.
think the Prime Minister has leveraged the power of democracy. And yes, when we say the dynasts should not have a role in politics, it's all the more. See, I mean, to be fair to Nehru as the first prime minister, he had to go with a trial and error method. He had to experiment with certain things. But the problem started, if you ask me, more after Nehru. Had there been somebody who really deserved to be there for the next 2 or 3 decades, India would probably have progressed. Nehru may have faltered, but he at least had the courage to take decisions independently and consider and informed decisions. The problem started 1966 onwards. So at least, thankfully, what the Prime Minister has done by talking about the next 25 years, he has ensured that the quality of leadership, doesn't decline from here. We live up to the glorious transformative years that these last 8 years have been. And I'm sure, the benchmark has increased has improved for India, we won't go down.
See, post-truth or hindsight is a very convenient. Is very convenient. But so I'm not going to get into the past. There were a lot of decisions that were made that were wrong. But at least there was a direction which was chosen, a path which was chosen. There was a lot of time. At a time when India and China were almost at the same level. Then China took the next 3 decades, moved, raced past us, and we were stuck there. We were somewhere in limbo. But coming back to, and my final question, I know we've taken a lot of everybody's time. So I'm just going to quickly wrap this up with the final question, because he spoke about the democracies, the belief in democracy. Do you also believe, General Saab, that there is a larger fight which is also happening, not just a civilizational fight or a cultural fight, but also between two thoughts? One which says autocracy is the best way forward, and the other one which champions democracy. So this democracy versus autocracies, is this also a larger global fight that we are looking at, which is also at play?
You see, Anand, I remember some years ago, quite some time ago, we used to always debate and say, does India deserve democracy? And we used to say, what is holding us back is democracy. We used to always talk about it.
Yeah.
I grew up in that kind of an environment. We used to always say, if you've got a dictator, we used to look across at Pakistan. In fact, there was a time you'll be surprised when people from Pakistan used to come to India carrying Kame soaps and showing it to us and saying, see, in our country, we have got this. And what have you got in your country? Nothing at all. You see, things have changed. And I think we have matured as a nation. We are on in the path of progress towards further maturing. Democracy today is being given its due, is being understood that it is such an empowerment. Without democracy, I mean, you look at the nations around you and see where do they stand in comparison to you. The weakest element in India is empowered to cast his vote. That's the most important thing. There are sham democracies all over, but the kind of democracy that India has been able to establish and give to its people has been an outstanding achievement. Notwithstanding that we may not have progressed as quickly, as fast as China, etc., I think our time is coming. Our time has come, in fact, and further you will find that the power of democracy will actually enable India to achieve much more. What China did was that in 1978 they came in with this whole modernization schemes of Deng Xiaoping, but still democracy was not there, right?
Correct.
Today, China, you can't say what is the level of happiness. That can never be expressed, right? The happiness factor can never be understood in China as to where does it really lie, because it's not a democracy. But in India, we have our contradictions, we've got our problems, and etc. But at the end of the day, our people still remain happy. And I think it's through happiness that we will achieve our greatness.
Very, very well said. And 100 crore steps and 200 crore hands, if they start working and if they start moving in the same direction, if they start putting it, every Indian does something for India, it's not something that we cannot achieve. But Suraj, Prasad, and Tuhin Sinha, congratulations on your book. I wish you all the very best. And I request everybody to read it. And I thank Nehru Center for giving us this opportunity to read it. General Hasnain, always a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you so much.
These conversations can be endless, but we'll also take it over onto my show very, very soon. So, and we'll also try and
let me just take
on the News 18 network too. Yeah.
Let me just take a moment to congratulate Amish Tripathi and his wonderful team at Nehru Central London. They've done a wonderful job with promoting books and encouraging conversations. And thank you, General Saab and Anand, once again for being so kind and taking out time and for being among the first readers of the book and appreciating it.
True. I'm halfway through reading Birsa Munda. So that is also there. I'm going to complete that soon. I'm waiting for your next Tuhin and also you, Suraj. And of course, Amish too. Amish is also around the corner, so eagerly awaiting that. Eagerly awaiting that. Wonderful, wonderful gentlemen. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anand. Thank you, Tuhin. Bye.
Thank you.